Easier, yeah, it's like
maybe a few seconds.
Edit in live, or like shoot them live, and
makes the editing
not have to edit.
easier. Jim Collison here. We're live from Infotec 2016, just after the lunch session, and we are doing live videos all day. Infotec one day this year, and we're doing live interviews. I'm here with Dustin Tauer. Dustin, welcome back to
Happy to be back. Thank you.
I think you might hold the record for number of these done with me,
or at least consecutive
here at the conference. I think we're 4 or 5, maybe.
I know. I think this is my 5th conference, and I'm pretty sure it's at least 4 for us. So if I didn't get you the first year,
my favorite one is the one where we're talking and they're literally tearing down.
They're tearing down the booth around us because it was time to go, and we wanted to get it in.
Yeah. So if you're watching these videos and you want to go back and see if you really like what Dustin has to say this time, just Google his name, right? Tauer, last name, and Google that with either Infotec or Heartland Developer Conference, and you'd see these videos
pretty much come up. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
We'll talk about different stuff each time. We talk about different stuff, so some good stuff. Catch us up a little bit for folks who haven't watched those videos. Who you are, where you're from, what you do, those kinds of things.
Dustin Tauer. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota. I work for Easel Solutions. We're a training and consulting company there. We kind of focus a little bit half on the training side of things. We teach, we're Adobe authorized training partner, kind of teach everything under the umbrella there, from the design tools to the development tools that Adobe has. On top of that, we do a lot of e-learning development. We do a lot of just general web and mobile development. So we kind of teach all the technologies we also use, and it just kind of depends on our client. Some want to learn, they can come take a class from us, and others just want us to do it for them because they don't have time. So that's what we do. What
platforms are you using to then deploy these training?
So we use a lot of what we do is still in class or in-person training, just because we have a pretty large customer base in the Twin Cities, and when it's easy enough for them to come to the classroom, they like to do that. But we use Adobe Connect for a lot of our remote training. We're Adobe authorized, or Adobe Connect authorized reseller as well, so we know the platform really well, and it's a great engaging platform for not just video delivery, but also doing, a little back and forth with the students and having a little bit more engaging environment.
Yeah, we've actually looked into that at Gallup for delivering some of our coaching courses online. We haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, but we've built a studio a couple times. We've practiced a couple times, and every time we get to that point of launch, somebody will say, "Oh, let's hold off." But
if there's ever questions, you know who to call.
Yeah, no, for sure. I should use you probably more as a resource. On how many folks come through your training in a year?
Oh, that's a good question. It varies year to year. It's kind of interesting. Last, I would say about the last year and a half, the training side has actually been down because I think, especially on the web side of things, people are a little unsure of which direction they want to go. There's a ton of technologies out there. There's a ton of platforms people are using. And so everybody's sort of spinning their wheels a little bit. So that means, well, we've done a lot more on the consulting side and just on the development side, because people just wanted us to do something for them. But yeah, it's a pretty large number. I wouldn't have any idea off the top of my head how many we trained from.
Nor should you probably.
Yeah, well,
it's a fair question to ask. Let me ask you this: what's hot at the moment when we think about training? What's in demand? What are folks asking for? What are you getting good numbers on?
It's probably a toss-up between e-learning, which is just a vertical that's always hot because companies are constantly trying to train new people. You know how that goes with what you're doing.
Sure.
And they're trying to move that training to something that's more versatile, something that's a little can turn a little quicker with how they create it, whether it's delivered online or in person. It's normally a blended model of that. So our e-learning courses, things like Captivate and Articulate and some of those tools are really popular. On the other side, front-end development, I think, is probably, it's a place that we're really strong with. We don't do as much training on the server side, but front-end development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, because everything is having to utilize those technologies nowadays because that's kind of what the web is made up of.
Yeah, that's the stuff the web runs on. When we think about JavaScript, there's a couple variations of that. Is it fairly equal across them, or is there one that's more popular than another?
The state of things right now is, for a lot of years, JavaScript kind of had a bad name because it didn't work well between browsers and people just didn't like developing in it. Those were like the Flash glory days of like the 2000s and that kind of thing. And it wasn't really JavaScript's fault. It was browser vendor fault because they
the
just
browsers were new. I mean, they were young.
Well, they were young, and they also wouldn't agree on what they wanted to support. And
Right.
sometimes, companies would just support what they want to and not other things. And so, so that led to, frameworks or libraries like jQuery that is still today the most popular library for using JavaScript. That then morphs into frameworks like React, Angular, Ember, some of these kind of, in some cases, all-in-one solutions. In others, you can kind of pick and pull them apart. React is kind of the hot one right now.
Really?
Facebook developed that a couple of years ago now, technically, but it kind of turns front-end development on its head a little bit because you do a lot more of your typical styling or what you might think of just the UI. You do that in JavaScript a little bit more, and it gets compiled down into what we would know as the HTML and everything that you'd see in the browser. So it definitely is an interesting framework. Some people love it, some people hate it. It's kind of still at that point.
It's always that way, though.
Everybody's got their flavor.
Yeah.
I know
wherever two or more gather, there will be conflict.
Exactly, right? and when one gets big enough, then all of a sudden it becomes a big target, yes. and so. But between React and Angular, those are kind of the two big ones that people use. There's sort of now old school ones like Backbone that have been around forever, that kind of paved the way for a lot of things too that are still popular. But a lot of people too are trying to move to just vanilla JavaScript as much as possible as we get more features like offline capabilities, promises, some of the asynchronous programming techniques that have been hard to do with JavaScript over the years that other frameworks have solved. We can start to do some of those things now in the browser without a framework. And so the technique now is to kind of just pick and choose. If you just need something to load data, maybe you can do that with JavaScript. Maybe you just grab one little piece of a library and use that, and then keep the rest of it, your own JavaScript code.
Yeah, well, you mentioned offline. You're here talking about offline
it's my
web
sessions
applications.
This year.
That's your sessions. So you said that, I thought, offline web applications.
That
doesn't. So explain that to me, because that's like military intelligence.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
Offline web. How does that work?
It's the future is now. So in a nutshell, the way it works is forms of this technology have existed for a while. We've had the ability for browsers to cache files. So when you visit a website again, it might be saved on your computer already. So if you didn't have the internet connection or there was a problem loading it, that file would still load. And there was something called an application cache that still exists but is no longer going to be supported that solved this problem pretty easily, but it had huge limitations and was just a pain to work with. So there's a new API in the browser called the service worker, and it's a part of a whole bunch of other similar things that all do some fancy stuff behind the scenes in the browser. But service worker objects essentially run outside of the web page itself, and they stand right between your browser and the server. Any network request that happens, this JavaScript file will intercept that request and decide what to do. And things that it can do are save some of your other assets down to your computer. So if you don't have an internet connection, it'll just access those that are available offline. Or it can decide, you just requested this image, but your network just went down, so we can't pull in. We'll just show you a placeholder image, in place of that until the network comes back up. So it's really acting as a proxy for your network, but allowing you to, rather than pull up a browser, go to a website and see a, internet connection not found, please reconnect. You can actually serve content to them and show them content in the browser that they can use. We do this all the time with mobile apps. Pull up Evernote, you make a note, even if you don't have internet, you can do that with that app, right? And that app will synchronize with the server after the fact. Well, this is all stuff that's capable now in the browser without us actually needing a native app on our phone.
Yeah. So when you say in the browser, does that include a browser like Edge?
Edge is getting there. So right now, the way the support works is Chrome, Firefox, and Opera all support it and have for a few versions now. Microsoft has said that it is a high priority feature for them, and it is. So it's they have. I
have a lot of high priority features.
I haven't seen exactly when that's coming, but I would guess very soon, because again, it's a really sought after feature. The sort of big holdout is Safari, because Apple has not said that they will implement this yet. They're going to have to, because that's kind of the way it works with the web nowadays, is you kind of have to implement features that are very popular. And this is a feature that is getting close to it's a working draft right now with the W3C, but it will be finalized, and it will browser developers will have to implement it. So
give me a best case or a great user scenario when we think about using these offline. What's just a drop dead, or what do you use all the time?
Well, there's the easiest use case scenario that is probably the most common is just being able to show your users a web page when a connection isn't available. So it doesn't mean you're downloading your entire website and saving it to the user's laptop or phone or whatever it might be, because that's kind of not feasible, especially with highly dynamic websites. Right. But the idea is, if a network connection fails or a request fails, you can serve them a static offline page that has support information. It kind of depends on your use case what you'd want to put on there, but at least is something that tells them you're not connected right now. We're not sure why, but you need to figure that out to be able to use it. So it's a real easy solution or a real easy fix to add in. On the flip side of it, when you think about the way that we use mobile devices now, I think in 2014, the stat came out that over 65% of users download 0 apps on their phone on a monthly basis.
Yeah, just leave
it's
them.
Like you get your phone, you kind of download all the big apps that you need, all your main apps, but then you're not every day going to the app store and looking for new apps. Like most users don't do that anymore. They just we want stuff in the web browser. We want stuff to behave like that. Well, on mobile devices, you can bookmark websites. And iOS says add to home screen. Chrome on Android says something similar. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but the bookmark actually shows up on your home screen looking just like an application. It's got a little icon, it's got everything. Now, if that could behave offline, which it can on Android, actually, if you're using the Chrome browser, iOS, of course, isn't there yet because of Safari, but I could literally go on a news website that I like, bookmark it, add it to my home screen, and then be able to use it without having to go and download another app from the App Store. The benefit of this is that every time I launch it, it has an opportunity to refresh itself, to load the newest version, to load the latest information. I don't have to go back to my App Store to download the latest update that might have a security fix or something like that. It's like the web. You open up a web browser, you go to a website, you get the latest version of that website every single time. How great is that? The distribution is easier. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to that model.
Yeah, I could see the news being one of those things that's it's dynamic, but if you don't have a connection, what you had last is probably better than, sorry, you get nothing at all. Oftentimes you might be going back to read something that you had hoped to get access to.
You wanted those, quick save because you're going to be on a plane and, you don't want to pay the go in-flight Wi-Fi or something like that. You just want to quick, save a couple things offline, and it doesn't require you to, again, load a native app that, this might not be a site you follow very often. You just saw something on Twitter quick, you want a quick book, save it for reading later and have that ability to cache it offline.
Yeah. Anything else along that you're going to share with the group?
It's 2 sessions. The first session is going to be kind of an overview. We're not going to get too much into the code. We're just going to kind of look at the technologies, how you hook it up, what's required for it. And then the second session is, mostly code, where we'll just kind of code up a simple example and go through, and then I'll share some kind of, more deeper dive resources for
that's
people.
Kind of different for Infotec. Usually that's a Heartland Developer Conference.
Yeah, they always let me come in here and, leak a little developer stuff, so that's my little niche here.
That's good. Let's kick back to the training a little bit, right? Very interesting, by the way. But let's kick back to training. So, there's a bunch of e-learning sites out there now, and we think of Udemy and lynda.com. Lynda now being owned by LinkedIn, I think that's
yes, yep, that's
right.
I think to the tune of $1.2 billion or something like that.
Somebody got a nice payday.
Yeah,
right. That's all that really says. So somebody got a nice payday. But when you think about that, with the average user, where's the right place? I mean, from what you know in the landscape, where's the right place for most people to get started with training like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the big question, because it depends on what you're looking into, what vertical you're in. If you are just a technologist, you're one of the decision makers on your team, you're not actually doing the implementation, but you're just needing to understand the technology around it. That's a very different use case than someone who is, I'm a .NET developer and I'm horrible with JavaScript. I need to, get better at that. So I think some of the really large websites, like the, Udemy's or lynda.coms, it can become a fire hose of information for people, where you kind of don't know exactly where to go, or sometimes it's too surface level for people. They really want to dive down, into a narrow focus, and that's one of the things that we really like doing is, custom training for companies that have a very narrow focus, because, they might know 80% of what they need, but that last 20% is something that's really hard, or something that they just haven't been exposed to, and they can't find a video tutorial that shows them exactly how to do that. And I think the blended model of e-learning, they've tried it with MOOCs over the years, kind of like massive online classes that have had varying success, to a certain degree, but when it gets to be too big, you don't get those specific questions answered. You can watch all these videos online over and over and over again, but if you don't have someone to ask a question to, or to get a little bit of customized information, it gets harder to do. So a lot of companies, including us, we do a thing called office hours, where we'll just be available for a certain time for people, for our clients who have that option available to them, to be able to just, hey, let's just answer a few questions for a couple hours. Not going to cover anything earth-shattering in that time. We're not going to scope out a week-long course or cover anything like that. Yeah. But it's that blended model of learning that's been successful over the years on the e-learning side. Work away on your own, find a site that gives you that information, but also have still some traditional resources. Even if it's not in person, it could still be online.
Yeah. Do you find in those office hours you actually get some of your some insight into what your customers are asking and thinking? Well, I mean, you guys capture that during those?
Yeah, I love it, because every time I teach anything, whether it's HTML 101 to a designer who's never touched the web, or whether it's a deep dive into Angular or something like that, I literally learn something every time I teach it, because they'll ask a question, they'll bring something to me that might be their own project or their own work, and I'm like, wow, I have no idea. That's a tough, and then I'll have to go and look. It's kind of like motivation to look it up, and that's what I kind of like. The more back and forth. I mean, it's selfish a little bit, because I get a lot from it too. I'm not just helping you learn something. I kind of learn along the way, because by me teaching you, it's forcing me to step outside of my comfort zone of like, oh, I just teach from this one book or this one, tutorial. Don't ask me anything outside of that. And that's why the more back and forth, I think it's good for business too, right? The better relationships you have with your clients, the more often they're going to probably come back to you. But to me, that it's that back and forth. It's a really a mutually beneficial arrangement, and a good way to have that blended learning model.
Yeah, no, we like to have, we do some podcasting and stuff at Gallup to kind of get that customer feedback, and we get that through our Facebook groups as well. Yep. They're able to ask us questions all the time, and we find that really, really beneficial. Some companies don't want to hear it.
Yep.
And so they don't, right?
Well, and that's the thing. Yeah, I think it's halfway being available to where your customers need you, on Facebook, on Twitter, on a blog. In some cases, like Facebook isn't a great medium for us to communicate with our customers, because most people aren't on Facebook doing Photoshop tutorials or development work or anything like that. Facebook is their personal, or Facebook isn't a place they want to engage with us. So it's finding that niche of where do my customers want me, and I need to be available there for them.
Yeah, well, it was really quiet when we started.
The sessions are out.
The volume has really picked up. That's kind of cool, though. This is what the conference is all about. When you think about the future, so let's look a couple years ahead. This is a question that I've asked you a ton. it'd be fun to go back and see what you said.
I know. Look at my predictions. I'll have to look those up online.
I wonder how smart he is. What are you excited for in the future? What do you see out there that you get pretty excited about?
It definitely the kind of snowball effect that we're having on the website from a technology standpoint. I kind of feel like from 2010 until 2014-ish, there were a lot of experiments and a lot of things that were happening on the web, but nobody really knew what to do. We were still limited by older browsers or a lack of support and that kind of stuff. And now that we're on this cycle of getting some more rapid investment into the web, both from organizations like the W3C who are approving a lot of the technologies or writing the standards for a lot of those, to the open source world that I can't even imagine where we would be right now without open source involvement, because literally almost every technology I use now is an open source technology. It's a tool that it's a library that someone just is developing in their spare time, or it's a development tool that is open source, because and it's just kind of that's the model that works, is like, just be open about your technology, share it, others will contribute to it. And so I think that really leads to this kind of rapid snowball effect of growth. So, more people using it means there's more testing, means there's more intrigue, and technologies like offline web applications wouldn't exist if it wasn't a demand for them, or there weren't people trying to use them and trying to make them work.
Yeah, is HTML5 living up to the expectation that you think that a couple years ago everybody was like, oh, HTML5? Is it? I mean, I know we're still inventing standards for it.
Yeah, I mean that is kind of the irony, is that it's been kind of the buzzword over the years that just make it an HTML. Well, HTML5 is really just the web as it exists right now. There isn't really, the version is kind of irrelevant. It's all about the technology that you're using, and I really do think that people have it's taken a paradigm shift for some traditional developers, traditional designers, traditional companies to understand the nature of how development works now. We used to live in a pixel perfect environment where you would design a website, you would send me a Photoshop mock of that website, and I would need to make it look exactly like you you designed it. Every single pixel, every single margin, and we would sit down. And then that was the challenge, is to make it look exactly like that. Well, we can't do that nowadays because there's a million devices out there, a million different screen resolutions. We're not going to make our content look perfect in every scenario. We want to build progressive websites, and ones that kind of can cater or can work in the lowest scenario possible. Offline users who don't have a network connection, users on feature phones, which are really popular worldwide. I mean, we have a lot of cool smartphones in the U.S., but smartphones are not the most popular device. When you get over into Asia, or other regions of the world. So understanding that, like, we need to, the key is to make our content available, and so we want to approach it. Let's make it work first and enhance from there. Oh, they have an internet connection. Great. That means we can do some extra fancy things with that. But if they don't, we still don't want to completely exclude them, because internet is not a given, especially when you're on the go. Same thing with design. We want it to look as pretty as possible at every single resolution, but there are going to be some devices that maybe don't display it as well. So the key is our content there? Is it usable? Is it a good user experience to get them through there? So it's that kind of progressive model that we want to use nowadays.
No, interesting. Last question. When we think about the browser, we always think about it in terms of a PC. So we think of Chrome and Firefox, Safari, Opera, and Internet Explorer, now Edge. Is that going to change fundamentally when we move? I mean, PC sales have all but flatlined or are declining. Of course, mobile is growing, although that's showing some signs of stabilizing.
Because everybody has one now.
Right on. Everybody who has one's going to have one. It'll grow. It'll still grow. Does that change as a developer? Does that change that version on the browser? Yeah. The browser versions on mobile don't seem to get the attention that browser on PC did.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. So firstly, on a platform like iOS, you know, you can download Chrome for iOS, you can download Firefox for iOS, Opera. All of those browsers, though, are actually still using Safari's rendering engine because they use something called a web view. So even though it's Chrome on iOS, it's not Chrome.
Right.
Google has done everything they can to do what they can, but that's it. They're still limited by how that platform allows you to do it, versus on Android, where each browser is able to implement however they want, which is why we have things like offline.
Yeah.
But in general, I think the browser is going to become more of an application container for us. We're always going to have the traditional use cases of, oh, I'm just going to go to CNN.com and, you know, read the news or log into, you know, some account somewhere. But the browser is a vehicle for us to deliver applications now that, like in my talk, can be offline, can actually behave. I use a program on my laptop called WMail because I have Google Inbox for my personal email. And WMail is like a shell for Google Inbox. It's literally just loading web content into it. And while it's actually a standalone application, it's actually web technologies that have been packaged as a standalone application. So it's a really kind of an extension of the browser. And so that's why I think, you know, the browser itself, while it's not going to be anytime soon, it's just a vehicle for delivering content to us. And what's running inside of that browser is going to become more application-like for us, or we're going to be used to that because it's going to have to. Like, it's got to work everywhere, and we're used to the usability of apps on our phone. You know, why not just have that same experience in the browser? Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I think we still have years ahead of some of these debates, some of these battles, some of how does this work, how does that work, what will life look like post-mobile? Like, I still think there's a new form factor coming. Well, that's not necessarily a flat screen on a phone, you know, we hold up to.
Well, and there, you know, and that's kind of the interesting part about the web, is because, you know, we know the internet's not going anywhere, and the technology behind it isn't going to change because, again, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are here to stay. You know, that's not going to change. But leveraging that same technology in other mediums, whether it is on, you know, Google Cardboard or the Oculus Rift or in some immersive environment. I mean, we can do 3D on the web. There's a lot possible. Part of the limitation is just memory and performance and some of the things of running in the browser. But when you get outside of there, those same technologies can actually do, you know, what you would expect as a native app. So why not share those technologies between both places? It's a lot easier for us developers to develop once and publish it to a lot of places. Hey, I built this web app. It works on the web. It's packaged as an iOS app. It's packaged as an Android app. So I have that ability to do that now. I would rather just have it be one app that goes everywhere, but we can be portable with our code.
All right, we're out of time. I could talk to you for a while.
I know. We better start doing like the hour-long segments, you know.
I should maybe just book you for 2 next time. Dustin, thanks for taking a few minutes.
Thanks for having me.
It's always good to have you. Thanks.
If
you're watching live, hang tight. We're going to flip over to the next guest, and you can catch this all at siliconprairienews.com/live. Thanks for watching.